Yeah. We rising above, let me tell you how it's done. Above average black men, shining like the sun. Chris Sr., Chris Jr., Devin on the beat, we're telling stories from the heart. Feel the pulse in the heat, yo! Yo, step into the room, we bringing that vibe. Highlighting kings and queens who thrive and survive. From the corner of the block, making dreams come true. We elevate the voices, yes, you know how we do. Chris Sia got the wisdom, laying down the facts. Chris Jr. with the passion, pushing us to relax. Devin brings the fire, always keeping it fresh. Together we're a force, rising up from the rest.
Above average black men, we breaking the mold. Sharing love, sharing stories, watch the truth unfold. Championing success in every single way. We uplift the community.
Welcome to another episode of Above Average Black Men. Chris is out on his comedy tour tonight. My son does comedy, so he's out doing his comedy thing tonight, man. So he's not gonna be with us. You can hear me, right, Joe?
Yeah, I got
Joe,
you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. So it's Devin. Now we got a very special guest, Mr. Joe Hicks, who's going to have I'm sure, some colorful insight into our conversation tonight. This is part 2 for me, but I wanted to get like a different generation perspective. Jaylen Brown, y'all know about Jaylen Brown. He got traded to the Sixers. Sixer fans don't care how. They don't care. They don't care how he got here. They just look. He here. We contenders now. They happy. They're like, now we can just get a trade like that for Embiid. Hey, but there's a lot of stuff around, and I've been listening to a lot of shows, a lot of talking heads, and one thing that stuck out to me is every time a brother is smart, that becomes the issue. And it's funny because when you research it, nobody can point to anything he did or said that would lead you to believe that he thought he was smarter than anybody else. So I'm interested, man. So I guess the first question is, this has been happening for history, man. You remember Alan Page? You don't remember Alan Page. This generational thing. Alan Page played for the Minnesota Vikings. He went on to become a judge. But that was the same problem. He was in the Hall of Fame football, but that was the same issue they were having with him. The defensive line. He was too smart. He was too educated. He's an overthinker. Does he have is he going to be distracted? And maybe not because of intelligence. You heard the same things around Shador. So I guess my first question is, what's your thoughts when you hear that a professional athlete, that he's too smart for his own good? And Howard said that it's a disease. Yeah, he called his intelligence that he has a disease. So what do you think about that?
To me, I almost think it's code word, man, for stay in your place. You know what I mean? They don't really expect brothers, for the most part, or even just athletes, right? To have a brain. Oftentimes, athletes overall, regardless of race, regardless of anything, athletes are portrayed as just brutes, right? They're athletic, they're strong, but they're not necessarily known for their intelligence, and a lot of times that they get the dummy tag slapped on them. So when you do come across somebody that's articulate, when you come across somebody who is able to, think for themselves and go against the grain, especially if it's not in the benefit, especially if it doesn't benefit the establishment, whatever league it is, whatever team that they're on, if they show some type of independent thought, right, then now they're a cancer. They're not a team player. They're going against the grain type of thing.
Yeah, to me, it's interesting. In my lifetime, this is like the first time I've ever heard someone get crucified as much just because they were smart. Just because they have a bunch of different extracurricular activities that isn't streaming, that isn't necessarily the most popular thing with people, and they're kind of killing them for it. And I kind of just don't understand why or where this is coming from. I mean, some people don't like, his personality.
See, this is me being from a different generation. I think the NBA is clearly sending a message that they run things. And I say it because if you go back to, if you gotta remember, Kobe Bryant, Derek Fisher, LeBron James, those guys broke. They were the first guys, I think, in any sport to break the strike because the NBA tried to break them, and they didn't. They stood up, and then on top of that, when they were telling them to be quiet, you had Carmelo Anthony, you had D Wade, you had LeBron James. They out there making these public statements, man, about standing in unity, about being a strong African American man, and they were untouchable, and they knew it. They knew it. So I think this the league is kind of saying, you know what? Let's remind you, who run this, because the backdrop that people don't know when they talk about him, his stream. He said the reason why he created streaming, his own stream, because he felt like people like Stephen A. Smith and Bill Carr, whatever his name is, Kyle, they control the narrative. And the only time athletes had a chance to respond was in a 2-second or 2-minute snippet on the interview. They never had a chance to really, or like he used the example when he talked about Boston, when he said that was the best year he had. And everybody took it and ran for it. Now, as a former athlete, I get what he's talking about, because it wasn't the best year in terms of team concept, but it's something about when you find yourself, you found out how good you are. You know what I mean? And you finally figure out, like, yo, I'm that good. And he was able to do it with his teammates.
Especially like people were doubting them all year. Like, they weren't supposed to be that good. And they're supposed to be a lot.
And the rest of those guys stepped up. And so I got what he was saying, but they turned it into this selfish thing. And for me, for somebody to call somebody intelligent a disease, again, for me, and this is me, my conspiracy theory, I think it's a new word for uppity. Yo, uppity now, you just too smart. Don't qualify for this position, Joe. We don't holler somebody. Yeah, I'm just. These are things that come to mind when people say that.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's. I definitely think it's cold words, and I think that Jaylen Brown doesn't get the benefit of the doubt. He has done nothing but what he should have done. He has done everything that he could for the city of Boston, right? Sidebar, this is Boston that we're talking about, right?
Everybody
Boston is not an easy place to play as a black man in America. Like, them brothers and sisters of another persuasion in Boston have a different swagger about themselves. They will let you know how they feel about you. When you're on their side, they're with you, and when you're not, they are going to let you know. But that's still neither here nor there. As an athlete for the city of Boston, you could argue that they would have never won that championship without his MVP performance in the Eastern Conference Finals, or without his MVP performance in the NBA Finals. You know what I mean? Jason Tatum didn't step up, right? When they needed a bucket, when they needed somebody who could come through, when they needed a leader, he was that person, and I don't think he gets the credit that he deserves. Now, I'm sure Philly fans, listen, y'all got one. As a Cavs fan, I was hoping that we could make a way, but Philly beat us to it, so good for y'all.
Y'all got LeBron. Don't worry about it, man. LeBron be coming home. All 41 years of him, he's coming back. No, but see, to me, and I find it quite interesting because, I'll be 65 this year, and my friends and I were talking about, we're kind of, and you heard me say it before, we're the interesting generation because we're the generation that we were born right near the end when things were allegedly supposed to be changed. Like my son laughs, Chris did the research. He said, man, you were born during the civil rights thing, and I was, between 65 and 68 in past, I was born in 61. So we've kind of seen it, and we kind of seen the promises of this new world that was supposed to be coming, but we see it reverting. We're kind of sitting in the same seat watching stuff taken away. And then if you go back and look at the history of sports, I look at, look what Bill Russell went through, just for common decency. I like to talk about Hodges, Gil Hodges, 3-point shooter. Craig Hodges, 3-point shooter, champ, all that stuff. He got blackballed because he made a statement at the White House. Nothing wrong. He didn't curse. He didn't grab himself. And he was 30-something years old. Back to back or something. Right? He was after, but they asked him a question. He talked, and it's still not equal. But I'm saying he got black, which had nothing to do with the NBA. but he got blackballed. At 32, two-time three-point champion, and another. And I'm going to talk about this because Michael Jordan did or said nothing, and he was his teammate. And I go over. You mentioned Jason Tatum because I want to talk about that. Is there a difference in how they see black people based on behavior in sports? Is Tatum safe? And Jimmy Brown wasn't safe? How, what do you think the dynamic there is?
It's just interesting. Like when you lay down the facts, it's like they traded the one that was the most healthy, that didn't have the Achilles injury. Like you said, that won the Finals MVP.
Yeah.
You got rid of him, but the guy that sat out almost a year, we don't even know if he's going to come back looking the exact same. That's the one you got inside. Just like you said, just because he plays the game, he's safe. He's not going to go against the grain.
Well, Joe, I want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, I think they're intimidated by his intelligence. I think that they're intimidated by his ability to think for himself. And I don't know that Jason Tatum doesn't, right? Like there's nothing that I have seen that shows that he is not intelligent, that he doesn't have that capability.
So he's smart.
Right. And
he's not Cal Berkeley smart, but he's smart.
Right. But then the other dynamic that I can't help but notice, and I don't want to take this down that path, but one's dark skin is one and one is light skin. So does this go back to an age-old adage of house versus field and staying in your place? And is there something deeper behind this, just based on the color of his hue, if you will?
Well, you know what? It's funny you should say that because for me, it's usually when something like this happens, half the NBA takes to social media. They do. Half of the NBA is talking about it. There's mostly ex-players talking about this. There's guys who retired, who's trying to make heads or tail of this. You don't hear a lot of current players. Like nobody on Boston that came out and said, "Hey, at least so far," and said, "Hey, we thank you for all you did for us," because he did a lot. They don't win the chip without him. They don't win 50 games last year without him. Everybody talking about they lost to the Sixers, but last time I checked, he wasn't the only one playing. But and it kind of takes me back. Like you think there would be a difference from when Greg Hodges to today. You know what I mean? You think players, because of generations, because of the type of alpha males we have now, that there would be some kind of camaraderie. I know we don't see it in football. We'll get to that later. But because they just iced Colin Kaepernick, man. But I thought in basketball, it was more of a fraternity. You know what I mean? I was surprised in basketball that it wasn't more people coming out saying, like, yo, this is crazy. It's different if you say we traded him because of money. I mean, I don't buy it because you restructure contracts. There's so many things you can do.
You're trying to get Giannis.
Yeah, that's my point. Giannis was going to make as good much money.
Makes a lot.
So Giannis, you can't tell me you weren't paying Giannis $1 million. But that's the argument they give. And then I was listening yesterday, and this is ludicrous. Somebody they said he wasn't even the top 6 players on the roster. Like, this is crazy how they just start to spin your name when they trade you.
Yeah, I mean, they do that so they can mess up the value, right? Or at least the perceived value. For me, it's interesting that there was no other team in the entire league that would trade for him other than not even a conference rival, but a divisional rival. You know what I mean? And what they got in return, like Philly, listen, Philly got a steal. Like I said, y'all got one, and I was hoping that again that the Cavs will be able to get him. But this is nothing different. When I take a look at what happened back in the day, you had mentioned Russell, right? Same thing with Jim Brown, right? Or even more so, Muhammad Ali, right? Muhammad Ali took a stand. He didn't want to go and he didn't want to fight in Vietnam, and he stood up. And what did they do? They tried to make it seem as though he wasn't patriotic and all of this, and it cost him a good portion of the prime of his career. So it seems as though anytime athletes, specifically black men, have something to say that goes against the grain, someone, whoever it may be, feels a need that they have to put them in their place and let them know what time it is. And that's not cool. And it's a shame to see that this is taking place, 50, 60 years later.
But it's kind of funny because I mean it's not funny. It's funny sad that, to your point, here we are all this time later in life, man, and we're dealing with the same issues. And we were dealing with issues where if you're black, African American and you're smart, you're arrogant, you're cocky. Regardless how you conduct yourself. However, if you act like an idiot, they love you. If you're grabbing yourself and speaking slang, man, and you're buying 10 cars, you got white out. This guy didn't have a DUI, had no battery charges, had never been in trouble with the law. He was too smart. You got guys in the NBA who've been drunk, DUIs, beating their wives. John Morant. Yo, you know what I mean? You look at these dudes who's playing in the league right now, and I'm not throwing shade on them, but then you got a guy because he's too smart and he's streaming. And it takes me back to is where is the support of other African American males? Because he's not the first smart guy to play sports. He's not. Richard Sherman kind of went through the same thing. Graduated from Stanford, and they kind of gave him a hard time too. Ben Watson played for the Patriots. Same thing, man. They gave him a hard time, man, because he was smart. What's the guy? Roll?
Myron Roll.
Yeah. Well, the NFL just hired him. I just saw it today. They actually brought him, but you only hear it about us. You never hear that about, a white. He's super intelligent. He has a natural feel for the game.
That you drafted number one as a quarterback.
He understands the nuances of the game. He's confident. He's self-assured. He's a leader. But then when it comes to people who are of a darker pigmentation, we're arrogant. We're cocky. So to me, and that's my next question is, why do you think it's not more of an uproar? Like everybody in the sports is talking about it. White, black, and difference. You have some Caucasian people, and then you throw Stephen A. Knucklehead into the mix, Stephen A. Smith into the mix, who want to challenge him, but he's done nothing wrong. And when you ask people, what did he do wrong? So I guess my question is, one, why do you think it's not more uproar, that more players are not speaking up? Because if it can happen to him, it can happen to you. Like some people say it's because he doesn't have an agent, and he's making his money, making the decisions. Lamar Jackson, him and his mom, and I can see more and more people doing it. And I sent you the clip that, about 30 years ago, John Thompson made a comment that he said that professional sports and agents were going to have a problem with the new athlete because these guys ask questions. These guys are just not signing contracts. So you're talking about the Georgetown guys. These guys know who they are and they know their value. So why don't you think it's more of a, support for this dude? Like even Boston, nobody had his back. Nobody.
Two things, right? I think one, folks don't want to go against the machine because they don't want to suffer the same consequences, right? You have to think today more than any time in professional sports, there's millions and millions of dollars at stake, right? And when you look at these athletes, they only have a finite period in order for them to create generational wealth for them and for their families. You know what I mean? Now here's the thing: NBA contracts are guaranteed, right? So there is that. But I do think that folks are scared to go up against the machine just because of the amount of money that's at stake here. And then also, I don't know Jaylen Brown per se, but he does also tend to be a loner, if you will. Maybe he isolates himself, just his disposition whenever I see him. Again, I've never met him, never met the brother. Seems like a great dude, smart dude. But I also know from being an introvert that at times when you do isolate yourself, that support that others will get because of that reason.
Yeah, but it's like this. You and I are Christians. We're followers of Jesus Christ. So if we're in a room with a bunch of people that's watching the booty call show, we're not watching. So does that make us bad? He's a good teammate. Everybody said the same thing. He's a great teammate. He works hard, and he's a winner. So and see, I go back to this because if you're a black person, especially a black woman, and you're in corporate America, and you are very choosy about who you associate with, and you're not smiling, you're evil. You're an angry black woman. If you're a black guy and you walk around, confident about who you are, what you can do, you don't act like Shaniqua or Ben Carson, they don't know how to deal with it. But it always seems to come back to there's something wrong with us. You know what I mean? It always comes back to like first it was shut up and dribble because LeBron James was saying so. So what do you want? You want to shut up and dribble? You want to be intelligent? You don't want to. We know what they want, but it seems like this is becoming a trend. You know, that they don't. You can't be intelligent and be, an African American athlete. Which is funny because in college they're supposed to be what student athletes. And I linked Shador to it because his wasn't the same thing, but people had a problem because he was intelligent. Because he come from football pedigree. So
He knew who he was.
yeah, he knew who he was. And then they mad at him because, well, he rich. That's not his fault. He didn't start paying college players. But the dude, what's the quarterback for the Buffalo Bills, he was rich when he came out.
Oh, Josh Allen.
Josh Allen, his family had money. That was never a question about what his loyalty was. The guy for the
Andrew
Denver
Luck.
Broncos, yeah, Elway could have went and played baseball. So it's just interesting how when it comes to African American, especially African American males and intelligence, it becomes an issue. And now this is the same league that for a long time didn't allow African Americans to play quarterback or cornerback, positions where you so-called had to think. So they were putting them on a line in these different positions, basically. So it's kind of interesting how you fast forward. This is where we are. Because remember, blacks couldn't play point guard. Everybody was trying to get a Steve Nash. Everybody was trying to get, somebody along those lines, man. And then here comes Magic bringing them over. So it seems like this history seems to repeat itself.
Yeah, honestly, it's not even about history repeating itself. It's just things have never changed in that aspect. You know what I mean? Take a look at Lamar Jackson, right? You brought up Lamar Jackson, multiple time MVP. When he was coming out of college, everybody was saying they should move him over to receiver or they should move him to a different skill set position because of his speed, because of his athletic ability. This is somebody who had won the Heisman, right? This is somebody who had won the Heisman, played his behind off down in school, and now you're questioning whether or not he's actually an NFL talent, right? And I think, we see what he is. But even aside that, like if we remove sports from it altogether, I think it just speaks to where we are in America. And that's really just what it is, right? When you look at certain decisions that are being made within this administration, even when you remove the sports arena and look at it in corporate America, not too many brothers, not too many sisters are going to stand up and speak out, even in that regard. You know what I mean? Just because there are consequences. Once you make people feel uncomfortable, now you're going to be considered the problem, and now they're going to deal with you in a certain way. And it takes a lot of character, a lot of integrity, and knowing who you are and faith in order to stand 10 toes down and go against the grain.
But here's my pushback. I agree. I agree with everything you said. So I'm going to push back in segments. My first pushback is, when is enough money enough money? When is enough money enough money? And I'm not talking about the guy who's on a rookie deal. I get it. But if you're a guy like, you a superstar, like, and I just use the name LeBron James, they not kicking you out the league, man. You know what I mean? It's not going to happen. And he does speak out. I'll give you an example.
He did speak up.
Yeah, but if you're one of those guys, they not kicking you out the league, man. They're not gonna go in the league and start kicking superstars out the league. Because people, it's funny because a comedian said it. And I don't mean this in a bad way. Ain't nobody showing up to see all white people play sports. It ain't happening. Whether it's football, whether it's basketball, they're not. The only thing closest to it is baseball. And even baseball, they got the Dominicans. Nobody's showing up to see that. There's not 11 Cooper DeJeans to go on every team, out there. There's not 11 Lucas that you can put on, or 10 Lucas you can put. So understanding that at what point, and this is what I say is there a change? Because this is supposed to be progression. We're supposed to be outspoken African American males now. We've made it. We've kind of carved niche out, but it's almost the same thing. I'm going to be quiet and keep my head down. I see what's happening around me, but I'm not going to say a word. Like, when is enough enough? And I use football. When Dallas Cowboys, another reason why I would never be a Cowboy fan, when Jerry Jones came out and said if anybody on that team kneeled, he was going to cut him. Man, you're not cutting Dak Prescott. You're the stars on that team. You weren't cutting those guys. But they didn't, and then after it happened, and now suddenly we realize he's right. Colin Kaepernick was right. But again, no solidarity. Nobody got together and said, "Yo, we understand police brutality as well. We're not talking about all cops, but we're talking about there are African Americans being killed." You know, so it's like we just. It seems like how do we get there where we're so splintered when it comes to issues that definitely impact us most of the time in a negative way.
I think that's part of it as well. For the players in the league, they're looking at it maybe as an isolated incident. If it doesn't have anything to do with them directly, right? They don't see where it's him today, but it could be them tomorrow. Um, and it's a shame. I think that in regards to when is enough enough, that's not for me to say. It's not for anyone to say. Somebody may say, looking at us, you have more than enough. You know what I mean? Like that's always going to be, you know, um, subjective, just depending upon what it is. If I know I got a chance to run up the bag as much as I can, not for just for me, but for my daughter, for my daughter's daughter, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I'm gonna do it to the fullest extent. But you got to have principles, and some of these folks, the principles might be a little different, you know.
I'm not saying don't run up the bag because I get it, but you run up the bag. But if you got a son, he has a possibility of being caught up in the same situation. You know what I mean? So you run up the bag, but if he gets out there and he gets the wrong police officer or gets in the wrong job or situation, nobody gonna care whose son he is. They're not gonna ask him, "Yo, your dad." So I think that's the part of it where I just don't understand. And I'm not saying I wouldn't expect anybody to jeopardize their career. I really don't. But I also think at some point you got to realize, like, that's what the union does. The union makes its money off of them sticking together. If the union says we going on strike or the lockout, you lock out whether you agree or not. Because the principle is you fighting for benefits. You're fighting for something that's going to benefit all. So I don't understand why we can't be like that when it comes to issues like this. Like, and I guess that's why I'm not like Jalen Brown. I'm thinking, so what happens if Joe decides one day I don't need an agent? I can do this myself. And he's negotiating his contract, and you're one of the star players, and you say, okay, well, no, I don't want this in my contract. I don't want my contract, I want guaranteed money. I don't want you to put my contract, if I get hurt, I get 50% of this or that, and you start your team. So what? Now I label you too smart. And because I label you too smart, and you can say what you want to say, but there's collusion in all sports. If people thought they're smart, there's no collusion. They're kidding themselves. Like you can't tell me, to your point, there was another team out there that looked at Jalen that wouldn't offer something for Jalen Brown. Come on, man.
Well, they're trying to say now that he knew that this was going to happen, so he was telling teams like, "Look, don't trade for me." That's what they're trying to say.
Yeah, but see, I don't believe him because he said he never asked me. According to what he said out his mouth, because he addressed that, trade never came into his mind. He never thought he was, which is kind of funny. He said he went to clean out his locker and his key card. Yeah, cut out his key card already. Yeah, so according to him and people in Boston agree, he never mentioned trade. And again, you got the right to trade anybody. I just the circumstances around it is like every year at the draft time, especially in football, something always comes out of nowhere to cause some player to drop slots in the draft, and most of the time it's a black guy. They cause them to drop. They don't know about this any other time until draft time. And it's becoming a trend. So if I go back to Jalen Brown, my thing about that is we tell our kids to go to school, get your education. Education is supposed to be so important. It's so important that they fight out every so many years. They fight about whether you got to stay 4 years in college or whether you can come out. We say all this, but then you get a guy who's worst thing you can say about him is he's too smart. And then the ultimate disrespect was you trade them within the division. So now you got to see this guy 4 times a year. So that's even worse. That's like, he ain't going to make a difference. And which really makes it worse about him, I'm pissed off. You trade him to the team who just came back on you 3-1. And you say to yourself, they still don't make them better than us. That is a slap in the face as an athlete.
Yeah. I mean, I think that Jalen Brown, Jalen Brown's case is definitely unique. I will say in regards to athletes speaking out, there are a lot of athletes that speak out on certain topics, but again, like it makes me thinking like what is it about this dude that has people not wanting to really put a stake in the ground and come to his defense, right? Because folks are opinionated and they don't have a problem stepping up to the plate. So is there something else that we don't know? Like I said, I never met him. He does seem like he could be a bit of a loner, and it's okay to go through life and live white life that way. He seems to me to be the type of dude that moves to the beat of his own drum. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And that's fine, and you're wired differently, and that's also probably why he's able to perform the way he does. But when you're like that, there are consequences, and I'm saying that as somebody who's like that. Like, I move to the beat of my own drum. You're not gonna get me to do something that I don't want to do. You know what I mean? And sometimes you gotta pay the consequence,
But
unfortunately.
you're true. Well, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, like, personally, I think from a lot of like players, there might be some jealousy there as well too. One point, highest paid player in the league, you're a winner. Man, people aren't perceiving you as smart when the perception of athletes in general is that we're all dumb. So there might be some jealousy there as well too.
But I think, Joe, you're 200% right, because they were talking about that today, and now they're saying that he was never happy. He never looked like he was happy. Not quite sure what that means. I didn't know winning you had to look like you were happy. I thought the name of the game was winning. You show up to work every day. They say he was the first one in the gym, the last one to leave the gym. To your point, his credentials speak for itself. MVP playoffs, MVP in the championship. He could have been MVP this year. You took a team that lost his star and was supposed to be in the middle of the pack. You won 50 games. If it wasn't for Paul George getting a jolt from the fountain of youth and Embiid waking up for a couple games, we may not be having this conversation. But in basketball, stranger things have happened in the way Boston lost. And it's not like they lost to a team who only won 30 games. They lost to a team who was actually supposed to be pretty good, and they were hitting their stride. They started to get players back. Paul George played better than he played in the last, 3 years. They got a stretch from him. Nobody knew, Edgecombe was going to be as good as he was. Maxey just gets better every year. They are a pretty decent team. Now they're more than that now, but I look at those things and I'm like, okay, if you're Boston, what was this made of? But you can go back to the Olympics in the 60s with Tommy Smith, and Garland, because they put the fist up. Everybody knew America. The racism was running rampant here. And you punished them. You punished them because now the world knew. And they suffered for years because of that. Jackie Robinson gave him too hard a time, man, because but he did the same thing. Muhammad Ali, he showed up, but he wasn't fighting no war, and he asked the same questions. It's just interesting how if you move forward, and you said it, the same stuff just comes up over and over again. They just kind of change the word. If I'm light or fair skinned, I'm eccentric. They may even say I'm weird in a fun kind of way. He's different. The phrase you just took, he walks to the beat of his own drum. That but it's used in a different way. But if you are darker skinned, something's wrong with you. Like, I've never heard anybody call somebody's intelligence a disease. That was like, you call somebody's intelligence a disease. And somebody said to me, well, he acts like he's the smartest guy in the room. He is. I mean, it'd be different if he was walking around there pounding his chest, but he is. The guy was, I didn't notice it. He was lecturing as a sophomore. As a freshman in Cal Berkeley, he was taking master level classes and acing them. Dude was giving his first couple years in the NBA and not missing the game, and everybody talking about that, but he was giving engineer lessons. I didn't know that. High level engineer lessons to people who this is their thing. So he is the smartest guy in the room. You can't tell me he's a guy on teams who's smarter than him. And I'm not saying it in a bad way, but he gave it all. When he was on the court, he gave you everything. First guy in, last guy. You won a championship. He plays through injuries. So I don't understand. He's streaming. So, but you know what? Whether I agree or disagree, that's the modern athlete. It's like you trying to get them off of social media. That's what this generation does.
But again, there's something about Jaylen Brown that I don't know if it intimidates folks or whatever it is, because even before the trade, there was some type of bad rap out on him, right? Unfairly, right? Like for instance, he didn't make the US Olympic team. You telling me that he didn't play at an Olympic level when he first signed that contract, right? There were a lot of people questioning whether or not he was even worth the money, right? What does he do? He turns around and he wins the championship and he wins the MVP. You know what I mean? So for whatever it is, man, and I hope that he continues to do what he has done, right, which is overperform and just kill it. You know what I mean? The fact that they're gonna have to see this man multiple times a year, best believe he's gonna make them regret it.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, he's gonna make them regret it. And eventually folks will come around. They're gonna realize what's another thing they say, they was on the wrong side of history with this one. But the fact that it's Boston black man, I'm not surprised.
I wouldn't want to be a guard on that team. when they, but see, and it's funny because it's kind of ironic, some of the things you talked about because you know even now, even in nothing bad, okay, as far as the Olympic team go, you can't tell me Isaiah Thomas, one of the best players of all time, during that time should not be on the team. So politics is in it, man. When they took Christian Laettner, come on, man, he was not the best player in college basketball. He made a shot, put them in the championship. He wasn't the best player on that team. Grant Hill was the best player on that team.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying. So when it comes to that, man, you tell me what kind of politics. I just put that under the can because again, it's kind of who's going to fit into this team politically? Who's going to fit into my agenda? I don't think it's ever just the dream team left off Isaiah, but even then, if it's truly the best of the best, how's he not on that team? How do you allow somebody personal? And I'm a Michael Jordan fan. I'm not a zealot of Michael Jordan, but you let somebody say, yo, and then Scottie Pippen of all people, say, hey, this guy don't belong on a team. So there's politics. So there's always going to be politics in it. So I look at it that way. The NBA has a history of doing this, man. If you look at Chris Jackson, what's his name? Abdul Mahal, whatever, shoot Ruth, Chris Jackson from LSU, same thing because, he didn't, he wasn't putting his hand on his heart, man, and he had an issue with the national anthem, which is kind of funny because everybody know now, look at some of those songs now, what it was anyway, but look what it cost him. A bunch of people got together in the league, so she decided the league-wide, we're not going to touch him. So I can see that happen with Jaylen Brown. They got together in some meeting somewhere and they said, look, hey, we're just not going to touch this guy, man. Because, it's still the ownership in the league is still majority Caucasian. A lot of decision makers around the league is majority Caucasian. There was a guy talking, I was watching one day his podcast, and Caucasian guy, and he said a lot of stuff I never thought about. He said, those very same people, who were saying that he was too smart, not even qualify for their jobs, man. They got their jobs because they're related to somebody. He said he meets these guys like, how did you even get this job? But nobody questions that. They recycle coaches. I love Doc Rivers, but Doc ain't won nothing, man. He keeps getting jobs. So they recycle coaches, and it happens in all sports. But then it never comes back to he's too smart. And then now I go, if I'm the coach of that team, and I got a problem because one of my black players. So what are you saying about me? And maybe I'm taking it the wrong way, but if I'm getting Tatum, so what are you saying about me? And to your point, I'll address that. He's quirky. But I guarantee you it was quirky before they drafted him. I'm guaranteeing when they did their homework and they vetted them and everything, he was quirky. I guarantee you before last year he was quirky. So I guarantee you this didn't catch anybody by surprise. Now all of a sudden it becomes an issue. Okay, well, he's streaming. So if you got rid of every player who ran their mouth, it'd be a lot of superstars would be on teams. And I look at Allen Iverson, and I love Allen Iverson, but it was kind of the same thing with Allen Iverson. People didn't understand. He wasn't perfect, but I was watching the podcast. And he's become quite the speaker, I gotta say. And somebody asked him about practice. He said, well, let me ask you a question. You think I got this skill without practicing? Because you look at me at my size. Look at me. If you passed me in Walmart, you wouldn't think I'm basketball. So you think I picked this skill set up without practicing?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what happened in all professional sports. Somebody starts a narrative and it spreads. And it becomes people's truth and people's reality. And I think that's what I see here because everybody you talk to, nobody can pinpoint other than Stephen A. Smith can tell you anything, and even he can't. What did he do wrong? You know, Joe, you know as well as I know, everybody not gonna like you. That's just the fact of life. Especially when you graduate from Cal Berkeley, you giving lectures, and because my next question is I'm very curious about that I want to get into. Could it be because he was trying to create a Black Wall Street?
Mm.
One of his things was, and to your point, in Boston, he was definitely about, equity when it comes to the wealth and different things. And he one of the things he talked about openly was he wanted to create this Black Wall Street, and black people, black-owned businesses where they put back in each other and people were sharing the wealth. Do you think that has something to do with it?
I can see that. I feel like I can see that, only because you're not only are you empowered, you're giving other people votes. You're empowering other people to, like you said, own Black businesses. They don't have to depend on other financial services or different things like that. You're thinking for yourself. Now you become a threat.
And it's definitely possible, and I hope he continues, and I hope he does it even while he's outside of Boston, just so he can show them. You know what I mean? But another thing too is when you're first, right? It makes it different. It makes it difficult for you. Even if you look at LeBron James, a lot of people had a lot of issues with the control and ownership that he took over his career, right? They had an issue with him bringing in his friends, who ultimately ended up showing themselves to be more than qualified, right, for the positions that he afforded them to do what he put them in position to do. But people had an issue with that. People had an issue with the decision, right? As a Cleveland fan, broke my heart, took his talents to South Beach. However, afterwards, you can say that there's now a trend where the Kevin Durant's of the world and other superstar athletes are now taking more responsibility for their career. So I think that sometimes when you are the first, when you are a bit quirky, sometimes you do pay those consequences. Unfortunately, I don't think it's fair to Jaylen Brown. I think he gets a bad rap. I don't see him in any commercials after winning the championship. I'm looking, maybe it's a different market, right? New York. I can't watch TV right now without seeing Jalen Brunson or somebody else. This wasn't the case for Jaylen Brown. Even after the Celtics won, I see Jason Tatum in all these commercials. I see not one commercial or anything with Jaylen Brown.
Well, but if you back up, you work at this point, they were saying similar things about Jalen Brunson. When the Knicks paid him that money, he wasn't worth the money. He wasn't a real leader because he wasn't vocal enough. They just all those things they said he wasn't. He just showed you. It was funny because they were trying to say the same things again, and Magic Johnson said, "Let me tell you something. They won the championship because they know. Because whenever he struggled, whenever that team struggled, he took over. You can say whatever you want to say. He made the right pass. He took the right shot. There were times when he had a good shot. He set up players that were struggling. Like you talked about Cat was like over something, and he drove and he passed from the ball. He made a 3-pointer. Cat went on make like 6 baskets in a row. So this is the MO about players. Now nobody's saying about Jalen Brunson now. But when he left the Mavs, that's all they were saying, the same thing. Not a vocal leader. He's not worth the money. The Knicks are overpaying. He's not a franchise player. I mean, you heard the same knocks. And he didn't have the stats. He didn't have the stats that Jaylen Brown had. Brunson he exploded in the playoffs. He got on the scene because he had the great playoff run with the Mavs, but he didn't have those seasons with that. Now, and he turned out to be a phenomenal player. Mm-hmm. But he's a sick one too. He's a century too. If you don't, dude is not exactly, giving out a lot of comments. You watch him, even his interviews short, to the point. He don't like deep conversations. Now he does crack jokes. So I give him credit for that. He does crack some jokes. But you know what? Most athletes who are good, that's what makes them good because they're a little different. They think differently. Like Michael Jordan. If Michael Jordan wasn't Michael Jordan, he was just playing like Roy Marble, somebody we never heard of, man, they'd be killing him. But because he's Michael Jordan, he won. It's okay.
But I also think that that's in my opinion, like who the hell are you to tell me how I need to even be? You know what I mean? Or how I need to interact. Like I said, I'm an introvert, so for someone to think that they could demand me to show up or act a certain way if that's not my character, that's not fair to the athletes. And so it puts the athlete, today's athlete, in a space where they can't be themselves. They don't want you to speak your truth. They don't want you to show your intelligence. But yet at the same time, they want you to overextend yourself because of social media. Could you imagine if they had social media back in Michael Jordan's day? All of the stories that allegedly took place with him or even Allen Iverson, you know what I mean? Those were some colorful folks. Because of the easy access to technology and things of that nature, folks want to have a direct connection to these people. And when they put their boundaries in play, now you got an issue with it because the brother has boundaries or because he composes himself in a certain way where you don't get to see whatever his friends and family get to see. And that's okay too, but they're not trying to hear it. They want you to jump through hoops. They want you to sing and dance. And if you have any if you stand against it in any way, they not feeling it.
Yeah, and I agree with you. But my thing is, why are we okay with that? You know, we do some strange stuff, man. We fight for stuff. To me, is just not that significant. You know, we fight. You take something off TV. We upset. We protest, man. You took my show off, man. And we get the petition going. We do. You know, we don't fight for a good education. You know, we fight because they wanted to move the stadium to somewhere. We fight tooth and nail about moving the stadium somewhere. You know, but yet we don't fight for equal representation in the sport.
I
You
think
know,
now is
go ahead.
I was gonna say I think now to me is an interesting time because there's so much chaos going on. Like, what do you fight for when there are so many things? Now, I'm not saying that you don't pick a side and you don't stand for anything, but when you look at the social injustice that's taking place, when you look at the wars that are going on all throughout the country, I'm not just talking about Ukraine, I'm not just talking about Iran, but when you look at all of these geopolitical events, and when you look at what's going on in our own backyard, when you look at what's going on in our inner cities, when you look at what's going on overall, it's a it's enough to make you want to holler. Shout out, shout out Marvin Gaye. You know what I mean? So something as trivial. So something is trivial. I got an old soul. So something is trivial. You know, as this multi-million-dollar athlete being moved to another team among billionaires might not necessarily resonate, even with his fellow millionaires, because there are so many issues that are going on in the world today.
I'm gonna tell you why it should resonate. Because that's a guy who was, from what I understand, was great in the community. That's a guy who was doing a lot of good stuff in the community. You know, so it should resonate because that's the dude you want. You want the guy, you know, who's doing stuff in the community where he plays at. You know, not just back where he's from. You know, you want the guy, man, who's a good role model. You know, you know, because we all know the education system is broken. You know, you want a guy that you can look at and say, this dude took education serious. You know, you can be a good student and still be a great athlete. You know, that's who you want. That's what you want to be, the face of your team, and at least you want that guy to be in the spotlight. You want the guy that's not getting kicked out of games for grabbing himself and throwing the water cooler at people and, you know, choking people in the stands. You know, John Moran is a great talent, but that's that dude. He has so many issues. You know, and they don't talk about him like that. So I kind of get what you're saying, but also say this: you got to stand for something. I'm not saying you every issue you get out there and you fight. I do. I agree with you 200%. You don't, but you got to stand for something, and you do have to pick a side. At
But I think
some
that's
point, at some point in your life, you got to choose a battle. I'm not. You don't choose every battle, and you should choose a battle that has the most impact on you. Something
but
that's close to you.
you also mentioned something that piqued my interest right now, right? You had mentioned that this is the guy that you do want in your community. You also
Yeah.
have to remember, I hate to say it, this is Boston, bro. You know what I mean? But like,
It's funny because everybody says that about that's the England Patriots. No, I'm just joking.
but
AJ
that's
Brown's birthday.
but
Funny
this is
push, you know they cousins, right?
say that again.
They found out. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
true. They found out that AJ Brown and Jalen Brown are cousins.
Why am I not surprised? but but
So we just swapped attitudes. It's kind of fun though, but
but
I'm
that's
just saying.
that's the thing though. Like this is Boston. So if this were Philly, I could see the fan base standing up. This man done brought us a chip, this, that, and the third. If this were Cleveland, I would say I could say the same thing. The fact that this happened in Boston, and also to Boston's credit, they are the premier franchise within the NBA. So I also think that they get probably too much credit for how they run the organization, just based on the fact that they do have so many titles and everything else, right? Like the Celtic way is a benchmark on how you're supposed to run an NBA franchise or even a sports franchise when you look at all of the success that they've had throughout the decades. So I think they also get some benefit of the doubt, fairly or unfairly. But yeah, man, Boston.
I mean, I think. See, I'll say this, and I think recently when I say they get the benefit of the doubt unfair because with the exception of the last chip they won, they did, and they won that chip. The chip before that, they won it with a bunch of players from different places. You know, they went out and got guys from different places. And let me tell you something. Bar Pierce and Kevin Garnett, you ain't talking about the best role models, my brother. I mean, I'm just saying, you're not. I'm not saying they're terrible people, but these are not the pillar of the pillar of the core of your society. So I'm just saying, you know, I hear you and I agree with everything you said, but at what point, even the smallest population, you know, what point do we stand up and say, yo, enough is enough? You know, I'm not saying picket and stuff like that, but you know, somebody should be saying something because you can't go into a classroom and it's the same thing with LeBron James. People can't tell you why they don't like him. People make up stuff. You know, I go a step further. Obama, even now, people make up stuff about him. You know, because he's intelligent. You know, oh well, he thinks he knows everything. He thinks he's this. You know, well, he thinks he's in charge. He's the president of the United States. He is in charge. You know, he's a pretty smart dude. You know, and it's not his fault, and it shouldn't be held against him. But it seems like every time a brother gets in a position, that's what it becomes. And somebody said this to me. I don't know if it's true. I don't want to do the conspiracy thing, but he said typically, if you look at African American males, when they get to a position, something always happens. Whether it was Kobe, you know, when the thing with the girl that, you know, all of a sudden she came out of nowhere. Now, I'm not saying this, but somebody pointed out that they find a way, you know, to kind of bring you back down. You know, they attacked Kareem because of his religion. You know, he was not American because he became a Muslim and all kind of things like that. You know, Chris Jackson, to my own Ralph, whatever, same thing with him. You know, so again, it's a pattern. And to me, it's almost like a pattern of you said it, you know, and I'll say Boston, you know, we still own you. You know, they don't come out and say it, but it's like, yo, if you don't want to put your head down and you know and do what we tell you to do, that we still control this narrative. You know, and you see it. So to me, it's about they send a message. To me, they send a message, man. Look, man, I don't know who you think you are. Now, I'm hoping it backfire. I hope he torches them for 40 every time they play.
But
And I do. Yeah.
But that's the thing of it too. Like when you're talking about billionaires who are majorly white, Caucasian, white males, right? The idea of ownership. You know what I mean? Like you own the team, right? You don't own me, right? But the way that they move and the try to plays that they try to put in the position are almost as if no, I own you and I'll do with you what I wish. When that's not the case. Now to that point, yeah, I think more needs to be done. But again, what actionable steps do you take to go against it and to affect change, right? Like how do you stand up, how do you galvanize the rest of the team or even the union in order for everybody to see the injustice that took place?
For me, I think, you know, there needs to be more of a mentorship system put in place. I think a lot of these young guys coming out, man, we have these lofty expectations for them and they just don't know. You know, it's hard to take something that somebody doesn't know, understand, and just all of a sudden, this is your code of conduct. This is how you're supposed to act because they only know the other side. You know, you don't hear about the guys like Jaylen Brown. You hear about the guys like John Morant when y'all here doing stuff with guns and stuff like that. So I think because now you got guys chasing likes. Everybody wants the likes on social media and stuff. So I think mentorship needs to take place, man. I never thought I would say this, but like you got to have guys who like Charles Barkley, those guys who made mistakes, who now talk with common sense. Shaq, Kenny Smith, those guys, you got to start up some kind of mentorship, man. And you also got to set up, to me, you should have to do some kind of community service. I think that needs to be part of the deal, man. When you first come into the league, you should have to do some kind of community service, because I think too many guys, they make the pampered in college now because they make this money, they go right to the pros, and they forget about the other side. But there's people out there, man, struggling. There's people out there buying tickets to come see you play that they can't afford to pay for it. So I think you got to do it. And I think, this other thing, we got to start to hold each other accountable. We got to sit there and say, like, if you Jason Tatum and this goes down, you don't say anything. You don't even say, hey, bro, we appreciate you. You helped us win. Come on, man. If I'm on that team and I'm a brother and I saw that happen, I ain't following this dude. Because he gonna do the same thing to me. At least have some kind of etiquette, professional etiquette. Hey bro, thank you for helping us win the championship. Thank you for holding down when I was going. Say something, and then to say that for them to come out and say that Pritchard they expect Pritchard to be the next Jalen Brunson. That's more insult to injury. Or to say that White was better than Jaylen Brown. Now it's like they think. They must think everybody on drugs. Or we Stevie Wonder and Ray Charles. So it's just so it gets to a point where not only do you start to slander, now you just start making stuff up. And again, this is where I think players got to stick together, man. And I'm not saying you boycott things like that, but if you Jason Tatum, they're not trading you, man. All you got to go on there and say that, hey, he was a good teammate. You ain't got to love him, but he did something because y'all played well together. Y'all won a chip together. Unless you that sensitive that your feelings got hurt when he said it was the best season. But if you listen to the whole context, he said, and he talked about how guys stepped up that didn't get a chance to play that probably wouldn't have got a chance to play. He talked about how certain guys grew that probably wouldn't have got a chance to grow. He said just for them to accomplish what they accomplished, he had the most fun. Now, as an athlete, and you're good, you're good, nobody like being number two. Devontae Smith right now, you can say what you want to say. Man, dude probably cheesing all over the place. Because he know he's a number one, but he took the back seat. Now, look, man, I'm going to show the world.
I think if anything, that if there's a lesson to be learned here, I think that you have to be conscious of the narrative. You have to be conscious of the narrative, understanding what he meant when he said that this was his best year, the timing, right, in which he communicated that message immediately after being, bounced out by the Sixers. That probably wasn't the best time. And he might have needed to elaborate on that comment just a little bit so other people don't try to run with the narrative, right? If you don't own your word, somebody else will, right? And words have power. So what you say or what you don't say is going to get interpreted. So you have to be very intentional with what comes out of your mouth. And silence is also speaks volumes.
But this is my pushback. Sometimes it don't matter what comes out of your mouth, man. The media manipulates and they change. I give you another perfect example. We got right here in this city right here. They treat Jalen Hurts like he's the backup to the backup to the backup. Like he's some kid they brought off a JV high school team and he walked in and he had a magical season. They hold Nick Foles to a higher esteem. They hold Ron Jaworski to a higher esteem. Because and all the guys do, all he does is win. That's it. He just wins. He's won more than Don McNabb. He's won more. Nick Foles had the magical run. Nick Foles ain't doing anything else here. Ron Jaworski threw 3 interceptions to the same dude, and then he will come talk about how somebody can't read defenses. Tell me that ain't the pot calling Kevin Black. So, and the first thing they say about him is he can't read defenses. You don't make it that far in football, and then you can't. Why? Because he's black. But when you're white, they don't say that about the white quarterbacks. They don't say the white quarterbacks can't read defenses. You know, oh well, he has to pick up his speed and his, and as he moves from player to player. All these different terminology things they say. If you pay attention to what they say, he just got his reads has to be faster. You know, the
But
terminology is.
but that's what I'm saying. Like, we know that prejudice exists. We know that America is still racist, right? So what I'm saying is, as a black man in America, whether or not you dribble a ball or whether or not you are in corporate America, it's important that you watch what comes out of your mouth, because other people are going to try to control the narrative. You have to make sure that you have to make sure that you get your point across, so other people don't try to so you have to be conscious of how you have to be conscious of how you communicate things, because it's not fair, right? Like, there is bias, there is injustice, and unfortunately, that's just what it is. It's not fair that if I get pulled over by a white officer, me being 6'4", 265 pounds, I have to make sure that my hands are visible. I have to make sure that I don't make any sudden movements. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, like, that's just some of what it is, and it still plays out even in everyday life.
Because he doesn't say wrong stuff, and they still take what he said and they twist it. Because he doesn't get angry. Because when AJ Brown was mouthing, I'm saying all this stuff, he didn't fire back, and he just said, "Keep the main thing the main thing." Well, he's not, he's not a good leader because he's not vocal and he's not. No, so I use it because he's the perfect example. He doesn't say anything wrong, but everything he says, they turn and use it against him. Don't say anything wrong. And so he's one of those guys that no matter what he says, he can't win. People are mad because Carson Wentz. Where's Carson Wentz at right now? Compared to the two. So I'm just saying, sometimes you can't win, Joe. Sometimes you can say all the right stuff, but people will take it and they run with it. They take it, they twist it, and they turn it all these different ways. And a lot of times, even before the facts come out, and they don't come back and apologize. Oh, it must be a feud with AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts because Jalen Hurts didn't go to his wedding. Who says you got to go to everybody's wedding? And he could have had a doctor's appointment. We don't know. Stephen A. Smith. Oh, when they asked LeBron James about Kobe, because he didn't come out and say anything, Stephen A. Smith, he didn't go to the thing. And then he was there. He left early because his son was in the hospital, but he was there. So even because he didn't answer and say, I was there, I was, and he didn't walk around in front of the media. So sometimes, Joe, you can do the right thing, man. And I agree with what you said. Some of us need to watch what we say, but sometimes you can do the right thing and they still twist it.
But I feel like this is why your players' association has to stick together and stand up. I mean, what is
I agree, but they don't.
I mean,
they collecting dudes. They collecting dudes of a bunch of millionaires. They paid.
Especially for like the Jalen Brown situation. It's like they should come together. Like, we're not going to let you guys just defame his character, especially because he didn't do anything wrong.
Well, and he's fighting back. That's another thing, Joe. People said because he has his own stream, he created his own voice to respond. And when you're an African American man, that's a problem, especially when you're not responding with colorful metaphors and you're not getting personal. He has not made these personal. Everything he said, he's backed up with facts. He used video clips. Now to me, I agree with you here. I don't think you have to respond to everything. But I do understand this. Unlike when you have a 9-to-5 job, he's a brand. He's a brand, and he happens to value character more, and he values Nike and the sneaker deals and all the other stuff. Dude gonna get his. Dude gonna get his, man. And you said this. I think it's more so because he's comfortable with who he is. And do I agree? Yeah. Sometimes guys, they gotta be careful what they say, how they say it. Sometimes, for lack of a better term, you gotta know the room.
Right.
You do. You gotta know the room, but also know sometimes. You can't, like Reggie White. Reggie White never said a bad word, but he was a zealot. He was this, Then when Tim Tebow comes along, it was cool. Everybody covering Tim Tebow, man. The cross on his face and he nailed it. It wasn't a bad thing. But when it was Reggie White, you're forcing your religion on people and all this and that. And they try to pit him against this, So again, Joe, sometimes you can say all the right things and do all the right things, but because we don't agree with you or because we think something is deeper with Joe because Joe a brother. There got to be something going on behind him. It's almost like the victim in a crime. And they go dig up his history. For what? Dude is a victim in a crime, and you going out finding out what he did at 12 years old. He didn't do anything wrong. He was innocent, but you go to defame him. So I think, and because you talked about it earlier, even outside of sports, it's the same formula.
But if we know that that's the case, if we know that the injustice is going to be there, like in so many words, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. You know what I mean? So if that is the case, then why even bother? You know what I mean? Like I might as well keep marching to the beat of my own drum. And like my mama say this, I could show you better than I could tell you. You know what I mean? And there you go.
Started out to talk, and he started finding. So he couldn't even be quiet. He decided, okay, well, everything I say y'all twisted anyway, so I'm not gonna say anything. He just gonna sit up there and they find him. So he's like, how do you win that battle? And I'm not saying you have the answer, but you put in this position because the better you are, the higher you rank in the sport, the expectations change. You have to go out there and talk to them. Now you have to, so you a guy who can call you all kind of names, you got to sit up there and answer questions. And you're human. So I'm saying, I get it. Some guys, they shouldn't be talking. Man. Some guys just be quiet. But then there's guys who don't say anything wrong, and everything they say, Michael Jordan can get up there and call anybody a freaking idiot in the room, and they would think it's the funniest thing in the world. Oh man, he was just, But let Charles Barkley get up there and call everybody idiot in the room. Great basketball player, but just personalities, they seem different. Shaq can talk about anything he want to talk about, man, and it's okay. So I think, how do you fight that? And I agree with you, but how do you fight that? How do you fight it when, and it's not about not being fair. It's just like, it's almost, if I do, you said it, if I play by the rules, I'm going to get spanked. If I don't play by the rules, I'm going to get spanked. If I abstain and don't play at all, I'm going to get spanked. So how do you respond? And that's where it gets tricky for these athletes. And that's why I think for a guy like Jaylen Brown, who in his mind, he thought he was taking a high road. I'm not calling names. I'm responding intellectually. I'm stating my case. I'm saying, as far as in the locker room, I've been on teams, man, where I didn't talk to a lot of people. My daughter probably was one of the most dysfunctional basketball teams I've ever seen in my entire life, and they won a state championship. They practiced at two different ends of the gym, man, because they couldn't get along. But when you rolled that ball out there, they were invincible. So I don't know. I hear you and I do agree, but there has to be somewhere in the medium, man, where for guys like Jalen Hurts who just don't say, and he still gets crucified because he's not emotional enough. Then you get on AJ Brown because he's too emotional. He gets too upset. Then you on Hurts because he doesn't get it. It's like, how do you win? If you're an athlete, because you can't make anybody like you. That's just not gonna happen. Like Joe. You just said it, you're introvert and you're going to dance, so you're going to walk or dance to your own beat. People, if you were in sports, people have a problem with that. Mm-hmm. So, as we close on time, but that's always to me an interesting concept because, I look at Marshawn Lynch, who tried that, and the NFL got on him. Even when he pointed out the things that people were twisting that he was saying, how do you play that game? Because everybody's mentality is not able to play that game. And some of us got some pretty angry.
Yeah, the media needs to be held accountable. Players get fined. What's the ramification if a media player, if a media entity reports something incorrectly?
I agree with you. I agree with you too, but there's no accountability there. You can say what you want to say. You can make, like Stephen A. Smith, I go back to this, when he stood on LeBron James should be ashamed of himself because he didn't go to Kobe's funeral and all the stuff like this. He was there. There was no apology came out. Or even when Stephen A. Smith and Jaylen Brown and Stephen A. Smith and even the dude for Cleveland, what's his name? Cleveland star player. I can see his face. Donovan Mitchell said the same thing. It's one thing to critique somebody in basketball, but these guys make it personal. Like when you start making up stuff about their personal life, and I never forget. And this is why I don't like Will Bond now. I don't like him now. When Sean, what's his name for the Washington Redskins, got killed, the safety.
Oh, Sean Taylor.
When Sean Taylor got killed, and he reports, man, he must have been involved in some gang or all kind of stuff he was talking about. For that to happen, man, he must have been associated with some wrong people and all that. It was a robbery going wrong. He was protecting his family. But I don't know if you're trying to be the first one out there, but that's what he put out there. And you can't take that back. And so I don't know if he called himself, and that's a black man reporting another black man because it was a shooting in this house, and he automatically assumed that this guy was affiliated with, and the guy just got killed. So to your point, there's no account. So how do you win in that situation though? Because this is the guy who was doing the right thing, making a career for himself. Was on his way to be one of the best all times ever. He put himself between the robbers and his family, basically saved their lives.
I think in all instances, as black men, we have to remember to be slow to speak and quick to listen.
Yeah, I do agree with that. So what would you? Okay, Joe, here we go. Because we're a little over. What would your parting words be? If you had this young athlete, man, who was you got the next LeBron James. He's 17 years old, man, and you got him for 30 minutes, and he's asking you, Mr. Hicks, how do I handle this? What are you saying now?
First and foremost, I'm going to let him know that you have to have a guiding light. Whether whatever that is, right? For me, it's my faith, and that'll keep you grounded, right? That's it. That's it right there. Everything that you do has to be grounded in something. Things are going to change. Narratives will change. What's hot will change. Seasons come and go, right? But certain truths are eternal, and I say that you have to stand on those principles, and as long as you can do that, and be okay with the decisions that you make, you'll be fine, and you'll also have to have a thick skin, and that's easier said than done. But as long as you can do what's right, you're convicted, and you're okay with everything that you do, and you can justify it. Don't worry about what the haters say. In high school, a homie of mine and I, we had a little saying among ourselves. If you ain't got no haters, you ain't popping, and that's it. Folks are gonna talk. Let them talk. That means you're doing something worth talking about.
You're gonna walk out. We're gonna be on a T-shirt somewhere next week. They ain't got no haters, you ain't popping. Where'd that come from?
And I would say to piggyback off that, also surround yourself with like-minded individuals that want to see you win. That will also keep you grounded and hold you accountable as well. But like I said, just people that just want to see you be you and see you be great.
So this is me and my old dad's hat. Me with somebody with boys, and I say, it's three things I would tell them. One, know who you are. Two, know your worth. And three, know your truth. When you know who you are, it doesn't matter what people say or think about you. It doesn't. When you know your worth is not just in dollars and cents, it's also knowing your worth that you don't put yourself in situations, man, that's going to put you in harm's way, man, or devalue your reputation. And I think, and it's every boss. And I always say, know your truth. But I mean, know what you talked about. Know what you believe. Know what you stand on. Know what you stand for. Because people try to bait and switch and try to talk you into this and talk you into that. I think those three things is what I would tell them, man. And then I would say, well, my fee is. No, I'm only joking. I'm only joking. But I do. I think, but see, this goes back to what I said. I think they do you need to bring in some men. If I had a team, if I had a professional team, I would bring in some brothers, not professional athletes. I wouldn't. I would bring in guys upstanding guys from the community, man, who would talk to these guys about character, talk to these guys about integrity, from that perspective. Because I think that's what's missing. The perspective you're getting is from somebody who's rich or whatever, or it's like, I'm not knocking it, but it's like you go somewhere and always got somebody that's been in jail to come back and speak to the kids. That's okay, but why don't we get people that haven't been in jail to help them prevent from going to jail? So I do. I think I would have guys. I would have a group of guys hanging around my team, man. Just everyday fathers, man. Everyday upstanding, in the community, man. Having events, lunches, and stuff like that, so they can interact and just talk. Just talk about life, man. You know, because one, these dudes ain't gonna have money forever. Some of them probably gonna blow it in the first couple of years. Some of them ain't gonna be in the league a couple of years. But your character and integrity lasts a long time. You know, I was watching this thing the other day, and they listed 10 guys from the NBA. You know, that's either in prison or just got out of prison. You know, and it's some crazy stuff. And I thought it was gonna be all guys I never heard of. You know, it's guys I heard of, man. Insurance fraud. Come on, man. You know, you making millions of dollars and then you're involved in insurance and against the league, which is totally dumb. It's just I don't know. But that's what I would say, man. You know, I think you gotta know your truth, know your value, and know your worth. Or know who you are and know your worth. That's what I would say. Guys, another I think because I think you need that. Just like we do in the community, man. You need to sit somewhere and talk to people, you know, who can relate to your story. You know, and sometimes you gotta talk to that person, man, who getting the crap beat out of them and remind you, like, yo, life ain't fair. You know? Another great episode, but very black man. I'm man enjoy it. I definitely gotta get
Yeah.
more than enough because you and I we can talk about I want to do this thing about faith, a lot of stuff I want to talk about. Another one of my theme songs. I think I should just like retire and do some AI songs. You know? For everybody, hey, you get your theme song, hit me up.
I like it.
Hit me up, man. Your theme song, hit me up. All right, good peace, man. See you guys next week. Same time, same channel. Yo, check us out on Tenders AABM. Tenders with an S, AABM. Do all that stuff. And you'll see it on Word Enough. You'll see Love at Blackman. You'll see Yard on there. You'll see some funny videos where we should do our cooking show. We got a cooking show we should do when COVID came along. And I was running a virtual program and we would do a weekly cooking show. That was pretty cool, man. We got a lot of nights, man. And you'll see a lot of stuff on that channel. All right? Talk to you guys later. Peace.